they reboot that show?
Yeah. It's only like the best show on TV or something like that.
MTV.
I felt
Wasn't
like
it on MTV?
Yeah, MTV.
when
yeah.
that first came out, people like saw it as a threat to society.
They did.
Fuck
But like
people.
to me, it always seemed like
It was
brilliant.
commentary on how dumb
People are
boys are.
men.
And how tacky and how simplistic we are. It was commentary. It's not. You're not supposed to aspire to be them,
Right.
right?
Except a lot of people
You
do.
already
are
You gotta unfuck yourself.
Yeah.
It's
You
a
already are
mirror.
them.
Like, fuck,
Yeah.
we really are that like lame.
Yeah.
Oh, shut up.
Americans?
I still
Shut
think
up.
it's hilarious.
Speak for yourself or something.
I still think it's hilarious.
They discontinued. I mean, yeah, they discontinued that name. They got sued by the Palmer family. Who?
Armless Palmer?
Liquid Death.
Oh,
They come up with clever names for their flavors, and they called
Arnold
the iced
Palmer.
tea Armless Palmer.
Is that iced tea?
What's an Arnold Palmer? Iced tea.
A lemonade and iced
Lemonade
tea.
and iced tea. Yeah.
So they
This
changed.
has water, agave nectar, black tea, lemon juice concentrate, citric acid, natural flavor. Something I can't pronounce.
Some chemical.
Pyridoxine, hydrochloride, vitamin B6 and B12.
They changed the name to Dead Billionaire.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty funny.
It's iced tea, agave, and vitamins.
I like when things like at face value don't make sense and there's like a backstory and then you learn the backstory.
Like when someone gets it, like, why is it called a Dead Billionaire?
Yeah.
And then if you look at it, though, people are like, oh, they got sued by the Palmer family
Yeah.
for a play on. God, you can't invent the flavor and then tell no one they can.
It's funny. I've been like researching copyright law a whole bunch because like I was looking at the YouTube stuff and thinking like,
Yep.
oh, why can't we just like take all the videos of you and like put them on our channel?
We have to get permission.
No.
No.
Here's the
Yes.
thing about it. As somebody who's done a little bit of R&D in this, so if you are doing commentary on it, in other words, I could take a chunk of a movie because I'm being a movie critic, but I can't take a piece of the movie and make it my part of my movie, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like I can make a parody of McDonald's and make a golden arch and sell T-shirts, but I can't make a parody and sell hamburgers because then I'm poaching on their product.
But the
It's weird how it works. It's complicated.
It is complicated. You're adding value to existing media. So basically, as soon as somebody records something and like creates it, they now own it.
Yeah.
So like, but it include like, the thing that I say is like, well, there was no video without you.
Exactly.
Like you should own it.
That's the thing.
But that's not how copyright law works.
Well, if I had the right lawyer,
If you
and
would
it's
have
worded
told
in a
them
way-
and made a contract before you had it filmed that you owned it also,
then
you can make
for sure
it.
do
You can
that.
make a case for having it removed, but you can't own the media.
I mean, yes and no. The one thing that in the last 10 years, as a result of this postmodern era we're in, that I'm realizing, and this goes in European courts, U.S. Courts, ever, it really does depend on if you have the right lawyers who can argue it in a way to base it on a previous case that's already solved. Then it gets passed. It's like the Supreme Court will gut voting rights law or whatever it is because they can base it on a law written in the 1800s that says, no, the original intent only meant this. It becomes a word game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's totally crazy.
I was asking my buddy who's in a popular
wait,
band, how much do you make on your streaming music? And he goes, nothing.
Circles.
I went, nothing? And he goes, well, our most streamed music is our stuff that came out before streaming platforms. And he said the record label owned all, like how the contracts were worked.
No.
Like we can't redo like it was a future entity that was unknown of future existence. And he goes, so our newer records are all, we get our cut,
Yeah.
but those, we don't get nearly as many plays on the newer records.
That's crazy.
Back when I was bodyguarding celebrities, one of the things that I had heard, because like a lot of guards like hang out when celebrities are in restaurants eating or whatever, and you're like waiting outside. But so Apple Music Beatles, chiefly Paul McCartney, owned Apple Records. So there's a lawsuit against Apple Music. And eventually McCartney won like a big multiple millions of dollars, and it enabled the Beatles' music to go on iTunes, of course, which also then instantly, downloads across the world and everything. But yeah, it's a weird world.
It's crazy.
Again, it's that whole copyright law
That's crazy.
And one of the most fascinating things is when I was trying to get a patent on my gi pants, because I invented this drawstring route of where you'd have a tangle-proof drawstring because the string gets tied up the pants and you lose it and all this stuff. And I thought this was a great invention, how hard it is to actually get a patent on it and all that. And in China, based on spiritual reasons, nobody can own an idea. And in the West, we believe you can own an idea, intellectual property.
And that's why they can make all those knockoff
They
things and we can't.
can make it guilt-free because in their idea, how can a person own an idea? You can only own something that's material, like land or the baseball bat.
Check that.
You can't own the label on the baseball bat because that's an idea. But you can own a bat, but why can't I make a bat too? It makes sense.
Fundamentally different.
In that Taoist Confucian combination way.
I don't like the public domain things that after a certain amount of time, like now Mickey Mouse
Yes.
has now become
100
public
years.
domain.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse.
So last year I always checked
The
because
1920s Mickey Mouse. There's like a different.
yes,
Oh.
yeah. As an artist, I always check like which IP is now a public domain. I remember like Felix the Cat's now public domain. I can put on our things a commentary by the Professor Felix. Oh, Professor, you're doing the Jiu Jitsu. Like I had
Let's
this
do
whole
that
idea. It's like,
tomorrow.
oh, we got to do Felix. I need an art team because now we can totally use that IP.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
All
All
right.
right, Toby.
today
Organize us.
we've got a. Today on the combat-based podcast, we have a guest.
Woo!
Born and raised in Redondo Beach, skateboarding, punk rock, and jiu-jitsu have been a way of life for this quintessential South Bay beach-bred badass since day one. He's been playing in punk bands since his early teens, has been skating hard as long as his memory serves him, and in 2008, he started training jiu-jitsu under Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's American Dirty Dozen black belt Bob Bass. After 14 years of jiu-jitsu, he earned his black belt under Melissa and Chris Haueter. A skilled and experienced Finnish carpenter and the man behind bass and vocals for the band Slaughterhouse, Eddie Cairns. Yay!
I think that makes me an E-list celebrity.
E-list.
I think.
A, B, C, D, E.
I think so.
That's pretty good. I'm like not even on the alphabet. So that's good.
You can be an F-list celebrity, I'm sure. I don't know what the criteria is.
Z.
Yeah, E-list.
Yeah, I'll start right off the bat. I'm going to say, all right, so those of you out there in listener land who did not grow up in the South Bay, like
Most of you.
most of you, there's like every area I know has its own thing. And maybe because I grew up in the South Bay, I somehow think it's unique. But I was aware, like in the punk rock scene, there's the South Bay punk scene, there's like the Orange County punk scene, and then the Orange County guys have their own thing, like the Newport Beach punk scene or the Inland OC punk scene. You've got the Hollywood punk scene, you've got the North Hollywood scene, and you've got the East LA punk scene, right? And it's a lot of scenes, and there's a lot of crossover in band appeal. And so the South Bay, when I was growing up, loved to claim a black flag. Like that was like the quintessential Hermosa Beach in the abandoned church. I remember playing on the drums in there and thinking, wow, I've played drums drunk for Black Flag. And then, but if I say that, it sounds like he's saying like I didn't play for Black Flag. But I did one night at a party, all drunk, played drums with Black Flag, which is kind of cool, right? And it gave me some street cred, which is absurd, right? And in that whole South Bay scene, like all the people that are 2 and 3 grades older, the younger guys, the grommets, are looking up to. And like we had our crew, and I remember hitting an age where all of a sudden younger people would come up to me and think I was OG. And I'd think I'm so disconnected from the South Bay punk world now. Like, and at your show, a couple people came up, and in their minds, I'd never left that scene. And it was weird because it like took me back to being 18. I'm like, wow, that feeling of being at a show and the energy and the mosh pit and it was really cool. But anyways,
I'm not going to ask that question.
That's what I like about it. All the things that I'm interested in are things that keep me in Neverland, Peter Pan syndrome. I stay young forever.
Yeah.
I am a child who never stopped
That's
playing.
another thing we have in common, except I have kids.
Peter Pan eventually had kids.
Did he?
Why grow up? I mean, I've always like when
Because you have kids and you have to.
yeah, but I mean, a
certain degree.
a certain
We don't have
part of you.
We can be youthful, but like I feel like I will get judged by one of my children for maybe being a little on the immature side.
and society.
And society, yeah.
That was my parents. That's how I got into punk. I'm second generation punk rocker. My parents.
Your dad was OG.
My parents met
Stop
in
using
the
that
punk
word.
scene. So most of my learned knowledge on this stuff pre-Wikipedia and YouTube was rummaging through my mom's photo albums and cassette tapes. So whatever was in my mom's car was the music that I first heard. So I learned it like that. But the disconnect that you're afraid of having with your kids of like maybe I'm too immature, that was my parents. My mom was 18 when she had me. So she even claims we grew up together.
Yeah.
And we're almost peers to a certain degree.
The thing is, you do a lot of stuff at a high level, which is not immature. Like, you're really serious about the things that you do, and you do them really well, and you're very productive. Like, to be good at skateboarding, to like have a like legit band that's gonna go on tour, which we'll talk about, and to be like a ripping jiu-jitsu black belt.
Yeah.
And to be like a badass Finnish carpenter guy that's like out there working a 9-to-5 job. That's a lot of
Highly
stuff.
talented. You're highly talented.
Right.
Got
So like
4 high level skills, or in the Gladwell scale, you put in your 10,000 hours in 4 areas.
Yeah, so like what is immature about that? Nothing. Which is my point is it's not what you do, it's how you do it, right?
I don't think it's an image. There's a childlike thing that
society puts on those specific
yeah, but I don't think it
activities,
necessarily
but they're
means
not really
immature. Like I think young people are some of the most capable people in the world. Sometimes they're immature and they don't have as much experience yet.
that. Yeah.
But those are the innovative minds that there's an amount of maturity from youth that I think you lose as you get older.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maturity and childhood, I don't necessarily think that they're detached or just, I don't know.
Yeah. There's something healthy about living in the Peter Pan situation.
Yeah, and I was like thinking at that show how punk rock is a Generation X phenomenon, which is also called the silent generation, sometimes called the forgotten one, like right after the boomers, but it's a small generation. Like one of our high schools closed because there wasn't enough students. Now, then after that, there was another boom, but
we're a relatively immature generation.
yes, we are
Gen
X,
X,
as being an
we're
immature.
You guys
generation.
aren't,
Yep.
but we are.
But we also brought you the computer revolution, the iPhone, punk rock,
Doesn't mean we're not talented.
hip hop. Yep, we really did usher in. We're the last generation before hover parenting, too, known as.
Yeah, I feel like I'm guilty of hover parenting.
And we're really good hover parents.
We're good
Gen
hover
X.
parents because
excellent
we
hover
grew up
parents.
thinking, my God, I will never let my kid just run around the street climbing out his window at midnight to meet his friends to smoke pot in the
Locks
corner.
on everything
Yeah.
and alarms.
Yeah.
No, we don't have that.
So your dad growing up, he was a roadie, right?
No.
No?
Let's find out where that got mixed in.
I don't know. How'd that work?
Um,
What was
Barrel
what was
Street
his
punker,
background?
wasn't he?
He was a
we'll
punk guy.
narrow that down. Another guy who needs to be on the podcast, I'm sure. My dad moved to California from Hawaii in his teens. Essentially, I'll let him tell the story someday. Got kicked off the island. It was go to jail in Hawaii or go to California
Go
with
to
your
the
family.
mainland, yeah.
And he had an aunt and uncle who had already left Hawaii and came to Carson. Short version, my dad landed in Carson, did not like it, hopped on a skateboard, and headed west towards the beach. Met a bunch of punk rockers there, and it was on. Like, it was pretty much, it was that simple. The story, I'm like, how? He's like, I got down there, there was people that looked neat. I said, I like that. And fell into punk rock, and he and my mom spent a lot of time in Hollywood going to punk shows there. But my dad was in punk rock then, and again, this is all secondhand stories a lot. Very cliquey.
Yep.
Punk was not popular. You were pretty much assaulted if you were a punk rocker. You were a freak.
Especially
Society
the
didn't
older
like it.
hippies, metalheads, bikers hated punk.
So there was punks that were vulnerable, and there were punk rockers that would make attempts to look out for the other punks. And my
Yep.
dad joined this group that was brought in called The Family. And it was a bunch of street punks that their primary goal was to help house and protect other punks against outside.
The Lost Punks.
Yeah, essentially.
They were kind of, yep.
So they had a reputation that I think was great at first, and then eventually you might start to get looked at as bullies.
It got gangish.
And I think that's just
all
a
the
Los
cliques
Angeles
did.
thing.
Yeah. The whole LA thing got the gangish. You know, there's Circle One, Lads, Suicidal, The Family. Then you had all the OC with gang types, and we were all in fear of what we thought of as real gangsters. And it was a weird time. It was a weird time in LA.
See, that's the environment you grew up in.
Very well. It's the beach, and a lot of beach people, like Chris was saying, in the South Bay. all the things you're saying: skateboarder, carpenter, jiu-jitsu, music. For some reason, I don't know what's in the water here, but it's a hub that stuff is right at your fingertips. So these are all things that the pioneers before me all hacked a path that I got to look directly at the path and go, oh, that's how you do it. So when there's bands, whether it's Black Flag, the Circle Jerks, Pennywise, or all the bands through the 90s that did it, I had a simple map that said, that's how you do that. Skateboarding, innovators in skateboarding. There was high-level skateboarders, Todd Conchalier, Mike Smith, Steve Rocco, who started World Industries,
Mike
came
Smith
from
and Rocco, yep.
from Hermosa Beach. Skate parks, and you watch videos and magazines of these guys doing it. You have a direct map of this is how it's done by the guys who created it. Jiu-Jitsu, I don't know why they picked the South Bay, but the guys landed in the South Bay. I was just lucky enough to where
It was here or
I
Venice.
already
yeah.
lived in the hub of where America's pioneers decided to settle.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff, growing up in punk, it's hard not to. Some of the best bands in American hardcore, I can point, like, I grew up next to where Black Flag's record label was, or where all the photos were taken, or where it was recorded. Like, even if it was 20 years before I was born, it was, or when I was born, 20 years ago, happening when I was born.
And for the last 40 years, the South Bay has always had a building boom because it's slowly been gentrifying. And if you're not college bound, you're construction connected.
Totally. I used to joke about it. I used to say, I'm building my way out of my town. And it kind of happened, and I can't afford to live here anymore. It was funny then, and now I'm like, oh my God. No.
We feel it.
How
We
different was
understand.
it back when you were a kid to the way that it is now, as far as like everything?
When I was a smaller, I mean, it was never dangerous here,
No.
but it was different.
Bikers and tweakers.
I grew
There were
up
bikers and tweakers.
Oh, I grew up mostly in North Redondo. North Redondo had a prominent gang presence. The park I grew up across the street from was the hub for the neighborhood gang. Never had any problems with it. It wasn't scary. It was just what was there. The neighborhood was still safe. There just happened to be gangsters in the park. The pier, Hermosa Pier, bikers, hippies, tweakers, transients, surfers, and volleyball players. It was just a mix of just like, not far different from the stories that you would hear of Venice Beach. Maybe not as extreme, but, and you watched it like, I feel like I'm one of the last generations that saw
Yeah, I think you are.
what it was.
Now it's completely.
It's not
gentrified,
there. Like there's, I mean, you look at
They even got rid of the Fun Factory.
yeah.
Oh God, the Fun Factory was so
Our
awesome.
little arcade.
Yeah.
For those in land who don't know much about the South Bay, we are a couple miles south of Los Angeles International Airport. We're south of downtown. It's the beach.
It's beautiful.
It's. I mean, I haven't been to every beach in the world, but it is a beautiful stretch of beach.
paradise.
That
I've
is-
been to a lot of beaches, and I will say, I mean, Hawaii's better.
I've
but
been to a lot
come
of
on.
beaches around California, and every time I go, wow, ours is really nice.
It
It's-
is. We're super
The sand
lucky.
is beautiful. The strand is beautiful. The view you have, whether you're in South Redondo, Palos Verdes, Hermosa Beach, where you're looking at the hills or the houses, it's just
Insane.
And on a clear day, we can see all the way to Malibu. I mean,
and
it's just
view of Catalina Island. It's
beautiful.
gorgeous. It's
It
We're
really
so
is.
lucky. We have dolphins.
You guys are driving up the real estate prices. I can feel it as you're talking.
Don't come.
stay out. The gangs are crazy. There's drugs everywhere.
Yep.
Bikers and hippies.
Yeah, I don't remember what year it was, but my dad, out of the army, out of college, came out here, and him and his friend almost bought a house on the Manhattan Beach Strand for $37,000, but they couldn't come up with a down payment.
Bummer.
Yep.
Oof.
Bummer for us.
That's crazy.
What is it that Winston Churchill said? Saving money is a wonderful thing, especially when your parents did it for you.
Yeah.
Sounds about right to me.
Right. So, were there like certain things within that environment that made you interested in jiu-jitsu, or
No, not at all.
was it just sort of there? How did you end up rolling into Bob Bass's place?
When the first jiu-jitsu was just another word like taekwondo to me when I heard it. I like to think of myself as mid-school. I'm not exactly new school, and I definitely wasn't of the old school. But I had heard of jiu-jitsu in high school. Me and my buddies were getting into fights a lot. The more like yuppie, preppy kids in Manhattan Beach did not like the thuggy skateboard kids with shaved heads and no sleeves on our t-shirts. It was just culture clash. Same area, I mean, divided by a block, and it was just like, those guys don't like these guys.
Oh, interesting.
Pretty simple. We got in fights a lot. And we were punk rock is named after being punks. We were punks.
Yep.
But we got in fights a lot, and I remember at that time you'd hear things of like, that guy trains. I did not know what that meant. We would just hear, that guy trains. The closest thing we could associate that was UFC.
Would you even train, bro?
That
Do you
meant
even
that
train?
that meant you do UFC.
Yeah.
As far as we understood.
You do FC.
And getting in fights a lot was happening all the time. I ended up going to jail very briefly. Didn't do any jail time, but I got arrested a couple times for fights that I was not in. But like street code stuff, you can't say who it was.
Yeah.
So I caught a case. I catch this case, and I had already, the first person that said the word jiu-jitsu to me, he had jiu-jitsu tattooed on his back. And I remember the first time I read it, I'm like, what, jiu-jitsu? That's nerdy.
That's super nerdy.
That's lame.
Yeah.
But I got arrested.
What is it, Karate Kid, bro?
That's what I thought.
Come on, Daniel.
That's what I thought it was. And I get arrested, and one of my dad's close friends calls me up and says, "You like getting in fights?" And I'm 21 at the time. Yeah. And he goes, "I think you should come in and train." And I'm like, "I've heard of this training." So I go in and I try it, and he tells, I'm like, "What is it?" He goes, "Jiu-jitsu." I'm like, "Okay." That's the thing my buddy has tattooed on his back. He goes, "I'm teaching a private. This guy's coming in. We need a test dummy. You're going to be his dummy." And I'm thinking, like, this dude doesn't have a chance. Like, I get in fights all the time.
Yeah.
And he kind of tells me we're just grappling. We're not punching or anything. And this dude comes in, button-down shirt, tucked in, pocket protector, briefcase, super slender build. I see him like, this guy is screwed.
I've had this look at me so many times. The
You're
look
the-
that you're giving the guy.
With your
People look at
fanny
me, I'm
pack?
the skinny guy with the fanny pack.
Well, I see the guy. I'm like, oh, this poor guy. But the I mean, it was set up for a lesson learned. It starts off as, all right, this is what we're showing him, Eddie, and he's working on side control. So you're gonna get on bottom. His goal is just to keep you down. I want you to try to get back and get on top. All he's gonna do is keep you down. And he was just blocking my hip and an elbow over the head following me as I tried to get around, and I could not get up. And I went, well, that was a fluke, right? We've heard this story 1,000 times by almost everybody who's tried jiu-jitsu. And then I'm thinking, well, can't wait till it's my turn. So I go to keep him down, and it's a very simple guard recovery. I didn't know what to do to hold him down, put back in guard, and then he'd sweep me, and I ended up on bottom. What the heck is happening? I went down to the Strand that night, met up with my friends, went, you guys have no idea about this thing I just learned called side control. I had all my friends on the floor on the Strand at like 6th Street, and I have them all on the bike path. I'm like, watch, you can't get up. It's impossible. You can't do it. But that was my dad's friend Kevin Sullivan, who was training with Bob Bass at South Bay Jiu-Jitsu at the time. And I didn't hook right then. That was like, wow, that was incredible. That was my introduction to it. It didn't take long for me to go back, but I was like, I was trying to talk my friends into doing it with me.
Kevin's OG.
I had to have a friend.
OG Venice.
I had to have a friend come in to do it with me, and no one would bite. I had 0 friends that would try it, and eventually I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go do it by myself. And it was thankfully Kevin. I had 2 friends at the same time. My friend Adam, who was he got his purple belt from Hoist at the old Gracie Academy, eventually went with Kaiki when Kaiki opened his new place, and Kevin, who was with Bob. So I had 2 guys who were old school jiu-jitsu, especially Adam. He started pre-UFC too. So I that's kind of where my influence from the old school was always there. I was taught by guys who were, I guess, first generation in America.
So this was at Bob's place, that first
At Bob's
experience
place, yeah.
at South Bay Jiu-Jitsu?
And I would always say, if you were going to pick one concept that separates old school from new school, it's old school was always street oriented, whereas new school became art or sport oriented.
There was the old saying when people would come in, no one comes to jiu-jitsu to be world champion. You come to learn to fight. And I think once upon a time that was true, but
Not
where
anymore.
jiu-jitsu is now, I don't want to say it's mainstream, but it is definitely more publicly known, and these guys are presented as celebrities. So yeah, people get into jiu-jitsu, goes, I want to have 1 million followers on Instagram and be a world champion like that guy.
Yeah.
Where they never looked at a punch block in their life.
Well, that's interesting. I feel like one thing that keeps coming up on this podcast is how important having role models is. And I think you're starting to talk about that with your life story, where you had this like role model that you could look, these role models all around you for this lifestyle that's very unique and cool. And
at a glance, they would look like they would be bad role models.
right.
Well, some of them were.
And some of them
be like
were.
that guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I had
There's
plenty
always
of the
that.
don't be like that guy, and I don't know. I like to think I have good judgment of who I surround myself with, but it's not always the case.
Yep.
That could be another chapter in this too. There was plenty of my teens that I was hanging out with the wrong circle. Who are some of them became my best friends and are on to great stuff now. But at the time, all we did was get each other in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, but similarly, like to these people that come into jiu-jitsu and what they see and know of it is the guy that wins the world championship. That's what they see. That's what's in their face. That's what comes up in their feed. So there isn't as clear of a vision of like what's great about the old school guy that has good self-defense and good old school jiu-jitsu. It's not a clear vision. I think the vision today of like the self-defense jiu-jitsu is like a nerd with a pocket protector that's doing something that's not real. That's what it feels like to me.
If you don't know how to do it, I mean, like eventually that would be my fear. I don't know how long it would take, but at one time, I'm pretty sure karate was pretty badass. I don't know when exactly that was, but I don't think
Karate Kid.
Well, sure.
Well, I think
No one messes with Daniel LaRusso
Yeah, I
from
think-
Reseda.
like with karate in the 1970s, depending on what school you were at, like the school I was at did not have a kids class, and I remember reading in one of the like black belt magazines that if you want to find the real arts, don't go to the ones that have kids classes, because
So
the
you were a
kids
little
class
kid there?
will water it down. And they let me join, and I felt so honored that they allowed me as a kid to be in this with the adults doing katas, and if you messed up, they'd go right through you, and it was kind of cool. And from karate, I definitely learned some things that I've retained. And a lot of it is all the hip orientation, squaring your hips off, which is very similar to how Hickson approaches base. Comes from Japanese karate.
Well, something you've brought up a bunch is the inception of rules in things.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of rules of anything. By no means a bash on judo. Judo is badass. But when you watch a judo competition and a guy does a throw and the position he lands, I always go, well, yeah, if this was a real fight, though, sure, he just threw me, but now I'm on his back.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's totally the dichotomy of the whole thing. Is that
Yes.
judo's like the athletes are like way more elite than the other martial arts, and they're more like more precision than the other martial arts. But the rule set, the dichotomy is that the rule set's like totally whack. Like you can just go like flat on your stomach and like sit there tucked up in
and
a
just
ball.
ball
Whereas
up.
like in a self-defense,
Where
it's
in
like the worst
reality,
possible
the dude's
situation.
going to stand up and just punt kick your head.
Yeah, I feel like I mention the word self-defense and I'm teaching grappling at judo sometimes,
And you'll
like,
scare them.
it like makes people uncomfortable. Like they're
Yeah.
like, that's not what we're doing. We're learning the sport.
It's just
of
a
judo.
sport.
We're learning the
Yeah.
sport of judo here, and like
And a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys are very much like, they don't want to hear like, you realize right here, we're not doing that. I'm working on my K-guard Berimbolo.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear
Which
about punching.
I always say, I'm not going to say that stuff doesn't work. I'm just
Yeah.
not a fan of it. That's
I
all.
mean, laying on
It'll
your
work. You guys can tap me with the silliest of things.
Absolutely.
That's not. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm
But
just,
the dichotomy is so extreme in judo, where like you're doing this like really really technical, forceful, wild, dynamic thing, and then it ends up where you can just lay flat on your stomach with your arms in, because you would never do that in any type of situation. You'd
and
die.
we do similar in jiu-jitsu. Like
Little
when
bit.
when you're talking about the realism of a fight, you've always said too, within reason, we're on a padded floor, and the understanding that we're not going to punch each other. So when I'm chilling in the guard, which in reality you should never be chilling in the guard, I'm doing that because I know the guy on top of me at jiu-jitsu is not going to punch me.
Yeah.
So
Because
you're
it's training.
because it's Well, if it was training, we would at least go, here I come, I'm punching, and you go, oh yeah, I got to move so I can.
I think the thought is though that we don't have to do that 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Like
No.
Chris says, think street. You're aware when you're doing that you're just chilling in the guard, and that's not something that you would do. In the
Or
street.
we'll be fucking hurting each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a white belt, I was rolling with a buddy of mine in remember my old training spot at my house? Mm-hmm. That used to
I
be.
never went.
You never went?
Nerd. TFTI.
I was invited.
So that used to be concrete with carpet over it before there was mats in there. And when I was a white belt, I was back there rolling with a buddy of mine. And I remember like rolling around and just trying, like out of instinct, like posting with my forehead on the concrete over concrete with carpet, and almost knocked myself out just posting like
Right.
from
Just
the top.
putting your head down as a post. Yeah.
And it's like these little things where it's like something you do all the time, and you are used to. It's like
Environment is stronger than
instinctual,
will.
When
right?
I was a blue belt, I think most people, especially if you have friends outside of jiu-jitsu, everyone goes, what would you do if I do this? What would you do if I do this? I was at the skate park and mounted a buddy, and he goes, well, what would you do here? And I went for a cross choke, and he tried to buck me off, and I posted with my forehead on the sidewalk. And I went, wow, that was the last time I like got more conscious about
posting.
let go if you have to, and find your base where I can have something where he's not going to buck me. I'm just going to get my forehead on the sidewalk.
If you need to put your forehead down, put it on a person.
Yeah.
That's a good tip.
Plenty of lessons learned.
So at South Bay Jiu Jitsu, did you ever take class with Chris back in the day?
I
Because you
didn't.
taught there, right?
I taught there
I
on
only-
and off a couple times for.
I would see Chris there at the time too. Do you recall? Were you Saturdays?
I don't.
No,
even
we were
remember.
he was like in the evenings, like weekday evenings, probably 2003, 2004, 2005, around that time.
When I was a white belt, I was almost only with Kevin Sullivan.
Okay.
When I was a blue belt, I started training with Bob a lot more, and I would like my priority list was like I'm making it to Bob's classes all the time, and I would see you there. I remember pictures, promotions. I'd see Chris there, but there was a lot. another one learned in retrospect. There was a lot of people I did not take advantage of like I should have. People who came through there.
It's crazy because at that time you'd been a black belt for like 12 years.
Dude,
when you went in there.
The people who were there,
Crazy.
I mean, Rick Williams was always there.
Yep.
Who's another Dirty Dozen guy. Bob, Dirty Dozen guy. Chris, Dirty Dozen guy. There was guys on the list that were, Dave Meyer would
Yep.
come by sometimes.
Come by. Yep.
Casey Olson.
Yep.
So there was some OGs in there, and then for a while, I know he was in the garage too. But Gabriel Vela was there a bunch when I was
Yep.
a purple belt. I
Gabe
did take
Bella's a
advantage of him.
beast.
What was the training environment like there at that time?
Hot.
It
There were no windows in that school.
there were
Yeah,
much
it was a steam room.
there were much fewer jiu-jitsu places at the time, and my friends who trained at other places, I liked the guys who were training similar to us, and we were kind of punk. There was no rules. It was kind of chaos. I don't necessarily think that's the way to go, but it was really fun. I mean, class had almost no organization. Half the guys had gis on, the other half had no gis on. There was no gi colored rules. Tunes were blasting. I remember at one time, horrible idea. I don't recommend anyone does this, but we would, for realistic and fun purpose, we had split up the groups, Group A, Group B,
Gang fights.
gang
Yeah.
fight.
I remember the gang fight days.
And it's like dodgeball, process of elimination. You get tapped, you're out.
Yep.
Oh my
And
gosh.
me and Chris
teams.
could both be on Tobin, and Melissa would come over to save Tobin. And now I'm trying to choke Tobin, but now Melissa's choking me.
Oh my
It was
That's insane.
It was
Sounds
fun,
fun. Let's
but
do it.
no, it was
It
was
gets really
dangerous.
dangerous really fast.
People
Yeah.
went to sleep. It's hard to tap when someone's holding your arms.
Yep, when your arms are like this and the guy's mounts you and starts choking you.
That's what your voice is for.
It's not very good. But no, it was chaotic. There was
Me and John want to do it.
That's funny because I feel like people have this impression that like some of the stuff that you see today in jiu-jitsu where like everyone's got the same gi on, the environment's very organized, people are bowing or like saying professor and all this stuff, like that looks to someone that's never been in jiu-jitsu before like, oh, this is a reflection of the tradition of this thing.
Yes.
But it seems to me like when I talk to the old school guys that there was none of that.
There was no bowing. There was Chris in his underwear on the mat. There
Sunga.
was none, even not saying high five and greeting everybody. I don't know. I kind of felt like it was good because to me, if everything looked all clean cut and stuff, I don't think I would have wanted to do it.
It was all.
I don't think I
organized
would have
and
done
uniform.
I am grumpy, and I'm aware that I am like a lone wolf on this. But the stuff that's in jiu-jitsu, I've asked Chris. I'm like, did you ever get grumpy about the changes in jiu-jitsu? 'Cause
Yes.
now
I was grumpy for a while. Were you?
I
You
still
still
am.
are grumpy.
still
I got
am.
over it because I'm too old to be grumpy. And we train here. Look at this place.
Yes, it's this. This is what keeps me in my roots. So you took a plant and I put it in the pot that it needs to be in. But I hate so much Halloween costume gis and Spider-Man spats. Like I'm just like I just
You don't like
don't
my
get
kitty
it.
spats?
You look at judo guys and they all wear judo gis. That's just it. It's just a white or a blue gi, right? Maybe there's a brand that's popular, but it's not like Supreme or Volcom. It's not like, did you get the new drop of the colorway?
All the different things on the gi is kind of generally like frowned upon. Like you want to have the least amount of stuff on.
Last night in my class, a guy had a gi. I guess there's some place now where you can send your gi and they customize it. And he had it Western with like Texas stars, fringes all over
Fringes?
it.
Wow.
Light blue. It was like gay blue Texas gi. It was totally
Why's
cool.
it got to be gay, Chris?
It was. Because it was light blue with a beautiful horse on the back.
Now, don't get me
That's
wrong.
amazing.
There's like I could be a complete hypocrite because one of the first gi I bought was the first Lucky gi, and I remember I bought it partially. Kevin Sullivan had one, and Chris had one that I'd see at the tournaments.
I
And
helped blow
it's on the
Lucky up.
pictures. It's the spray painted combat base with the spray painted Machado down the lapel, and I was like, that is cool.
Cool. Yeah.
And it was I think it was like the first one that had big logos and contrast stitching, but it just got so out of hand. Tie-dye gis and NASA spacesuits and Dragon Ball Z gis.
Yeah.
Where you look at wrestlers who are in the mat room for 12 hours a day and they're just in their sweats.
But we have all that flamboyance versus like schools where you can only
can
wear,
only wear plain
all
white
white
tee. Yep.
with their patch on it
yep.
only.
If you could have one or the other, which one would you pick though?
I'd
The
go to
flamboyance.
Yes.
100%.
Wear
I
whatever
love
you
my
want, yeah.
combat base green gi that was made by Ludwig van. I love those gis. I think they're so beautiful. I just like freedom. I don't want to be
I'm with
plain.
you.
I'm not vanilla.
I agree.
The rule of like you will wear white and only white is crazy, but I mean because the school I was at, that was also lame, and the only way you could have contrast is like let's trade pants.
Yeah.
So now you have white pants and I have blue pants, and it was mismatched top, or it just kind of happened like that. I don't know how many times.
I had mismatched.
I feel like all the old Machado dudes in pictures all had a white top and blue pants, or vice versa.
That was common, yep.
It was because we were just taking what we could get.
Yes.
Like if we wanted to get a gi, we had to go drive over to Howard's, and
It
this
was
was like
harder
in
to
the
get
early
gis,
2000s. And like I had one gi, and I had to wash it every time, and then finally
Yeah.
OTM opened, and then you could actually go in and pick out
try
a
a gi on.
and
That's
try it
right.
on. And then I had 2 gis. You know, but
OTM
now I
was
have
cool.
22
Yeah.
gis because all my friends have gi companies.
I'd walk in there. I lived right around the corner. It was next to Hegan's place on Artesia, and Bob's South Bay Jiu Jitsu was in Hermosa, but I lived right next to Hegan's, and I'd be at home like I'm gonna walk over to OTM, and I'd just walk in and look at gis. Like,
It was
this is
cool. Yeah, Amazon killed it.
Yeah. Yeah, you buy gis online.
Amazon
Yeah,
killed
all
a
the
lot
gi
of cool
companies
things. Yep.
sell their stuff online, including
Online,
us.
yeah, including us.
Including Combat Base.
You can buy a
Combatbase.com.
combat-based gi online.
You
Yeah,
can buy a
the gis are
combat
nice.
based gi online. We have a few left from our run with Origin.
And you can go on eBay and get a couple of the original Magic Kimono drops for $500 a gi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OG.
OG.
Reboot them.
That would be cool. Yeah.
So let's talk about music.
Let's do it. There was always a guitar in my house. My mom, big fan of music. My dad, big fan of music. My grandpa, big fan of music. Whether it was old school punk rock, classic rock, blues, everything from the 90s that my mom got into after the 80s. My mom was a big Jane's Addiction, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, Blind Melon,
Pumpkins.
all of that stuff. And MTV was still awesome. I remember being
Beavis.
Oh,
I
shut up.
I was a kid watching MTV, and they would have like Friday night concerts. So when you turn it on, and my mom was young, so we were watching MTV together. I was 3rd grade, and this, like, if there's ever one of those, it's probably one of the only things I have where I'm like, that was the moment. There was a band from Australia. They looked like Nirvana, but they weren't Nirvana. They were called Silverchair, and they were playing on the mezzanine, or not the mezzanine, the awning at Radio City Music Hall for the MTV Music Awards. I must have been 8 or 9, but they were 16, and I went, so I can do that by the time I'm 16? Like that was where my head just went, oh, when I'm 16, I'm gonna be in a band playing on MTV. That makes so much sense. I'm in. Sign me up. I'm in.
We're like, yeah, this band's rad. Oh, shut
Pretty
up.
much.
Shut up.
But that was
this band sucks.
that was really easy for me to just walk over to the guitar that was in the living room and go, I'm going to learn how to play this. My Uncle Ed was a drummer in a band. He was over. My parties were at my house all the time. He taught me how to play surf tunes on the guitar. Had there been a drum set in my house, I probably would have been a drummer, but there was a guitar there. I became a guitar player.
What were the bands that like really influenced you early on? Like what were you listening to from that time forward? What were some of the stuff that you liked?
Well, my mom's cassette tapes kind of dictated what my first things were, and it was everything from Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nirvana, Soundgarden, and then the selection of her 80s stuff that was tapes of GBH, Black Flag, The Descendants.
With Dead Kennedys.
Yeah, I can visualize. You know, remember the zippered leather
Yep.
cassette cases? My mom had one of those. And
I
that
had
was,
something like that too. My sister had a boyfriend that was in a band, and he gave me one of those zippered cases, and it had like Suicidal Tendencies, Guttermouth, No Effects, a bunch of other bands, Lagwagon, all on tapes in there. And that was where I started listening to that stuff. I had to be like
and my mom had a box of VHS tapes. So my dad used to. There was a production called Golden Voice. They're huge now. They do Coachella, but in the '80s, they were who was putting on all the early punk shows. I think the first Golden Voice show was TSOL at some like I want to say it was like a roller rink in the valley or something like that.
I remember the roller rink.
But the guys from Golden Voice would hire the guys from the family who were like the prominent punk clique to bounce the stage and make sure people were getting off and there was no fights. They were the enforcers, supervisors. So they got to go to shows for free all the time.
With Cafe
If they
de
were
Grand.
at the Cafe de Grand, the Olympic, Santa Monica Civic, these are all things that are like cult stories to me. I never attended any of these. I was
I loved Cafe
barely
de
born.
Grand.
But my mom had cassette tapes, and on the cassette tapes were bands like the Bad Brains, Bad Religion, GBH, and in all those tapes, I could see my dad at the front of the stage, and they were all crazy 80s punk rock dudes. My dad had big spiked hair, war paint, studs, and leather. It was...
I loved it.
I got to show you pictures.
I'd love to see it. I loved at your show. I was standing behind your dad, and then so I was looking at your dad sitting there right at the stage, and then I was looking at you right above him, like doing your thing and playing bass and singing, and it just was a cool. It was like a cool visual, just to see your dad doing his thing, you doing your thing. It was a cool like, this is a healthy family situation here, and what maybe somebody might say like, oh, this is an unhealthy situation. But like my experience is this is a very cool, like supportive father-son situation.
1986, it would have been unhealthy.
Yeah, but it's so not, and it's been the opposite of what
My mom's showing me of these things was much more sane and controlled. My dad, again, for the podcast, don't mean to out him, my dad gets out of prison when I'm 13. Comes around, gets like on the straight and narrow, super cool. But my dad's also still young at the time. When I'm 13, he's 36. Kind of wild. He comes back around. Punk bands have all been reuniting. Pennywise is huge. Bands like TSOL and X have all reunited,
Yeah,
and they're all still in their 30s.
Yep.
Specifically, this one show, it was the guitar player of Social Distortion had just passed away. And there was this big benefit concert. It was X, TSOL, Pennywise, Social Distortion, Agent Orange, The Offspring. I think Social Distortion was headlining. But Fletcher, who's from Hermosa Beach, the guitar player Pennywise, especially at the time, known for being the ruckus king.
Yeah, he was pretty gnarly.
We're on the grass at Irvine Meadows in the far back, and he says, "Who here's from the South Bay tonight?" And there was a heavy South Bay attendance. So there's a big scream, and he goes, "Everyone from the South Bay, get up front now," calls out the next song, and you saw a sea of people from the entire, what is that? Irvine Meadows Theater? Amphitheater. The entire amphitheater just start flooding to the front.
Wow.
We're at the farthest back. My dad goes, "Let's go." I'm 13. Also, not a big guy. You can imagine when I'm 13. Much smaller. This was my Little League bat, I think.
Aww.
He says, "Let's go." We hop the first rail, and he just takes off and keeps going. And I'm looking at like 6 giant, big Samoan bouncer dudes in yellow jackets saying, "No, stay up there." And my dad is just still on a direct line going. I'm going, okay, I think I live here now. But that's bringing up like the influence on it, watching him run all the way back. That was kind of my first being taught to be anti-authority, kind of.
Yeah.
My dad is standing next to security guards who are saying, "Stay there," and he's going, "Come on, let's go." So that was one of my... We made it to the stage. The entire South Bay ended up in the front of the stage for Pennywise. The seats were torn out. South Bay is a little bit of ruckus animals in comparison to anybody else around Los Angeles.
Well, it's like everybody was rivaling each other, right? We got to outdo Venice, and then because they were kind of the iconic LA punk scene was Venice, and everybody wanted. It's kind of like Orange County felt like they were always in LA's shadow. So in some ways they got gnarlier than LA because they felt like they had to outdo LA, the scene. All right, I got a question.
Shoot.
So the early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. Top 3 punk bands of the early 80s. Go.
Very biasedly, Black Flag is at the top of the food chain, mostly because how innovative they were. Nervous Breakdown EP comes out in like 1979. I think they recorded it in 78. To put that in context, that distorted guitar, really
I'm about to have a nervous breakdown.
the only
My
big
head really
bands that were
hurts.
doing it before them, it might have even come out in 78, but the only
That's
bands
when I
that were
was
doing
born.
that before them were the
gonna
Ramones and the
go
Sex
berserk.
Pistols, who were great, but to hear just these, I mean, Black Flag were like hippie nerds that were super, super hardcore, so I'm easily going Black Flag is
That's in one of my top
top
early
of the
80s.
food
yeah.
chain.
Number 1, what's your number 3?
Now, don't get me wrong. Like, what are of like my favorite listens and things that I love? These things always change. And if you ask me my top 3 next year, it's totally
Right,
gonna
it could change, yeah.
But also, I mean, and Black Flag Hometown, like that was, the bars were spray painted on walls and graffitied in the concrete all around town. So as soon as you hear Black Flag and learn what it is, when you grow up here, you're like, oh, there it is in the concrete. There it is on the wall. There it is tattooed on that thug over there. It's just, you saw it everywhere. So biasly, Hometown, Black Flag. Also on that same train, the first tape that I fell in love with was my mom's Descendants tape. They were also South Bay guys, also big nerds. Song about fishing and being neglected by girls. It was
Nerd punk, yep.
It was just very melodic, also hardcore.
Yeah.
I loved it. But I also love fast, hard. I'm driven by anger. God, I love GBH. English hardcore, 1982.
I got to just add in there Minor Threat.
Oh God, see,
That is the iconic
3's not
early
enough.
80s punk.
It's not
not
though.
enough, but Minor Threat, Black Flag, the Dead Kennedys are my 3
The Bad Brains.
early bands.
There's so many-
Bad Brains were awesome too.
so many
You're
of
right,
these
there's
things.
So many.
Minor Threat are the first band that
Ian Mackay
were writing
Minor
songs
Threat.
about. You've heard Ian talk about it too, where he brings up straight edge.
Yep.
Most people think straight edge, oh, you don't do drugs, that means you're straight edge. I disagree. Straight edge means I don't do drugs and I'm still hardcore. You can be off drugs and not be hardcore. There's a difference. I relate to that. I am an uncontrollable monster that should be leashed, especially when you start feeding me fast music and driven by anger. But having songs that were more relatable of like, oh, I don't do drugs, neither do these guys. And they're just as angry as me. That makes sense.
Not doing drugs could make one more
It
angry.
can make you really dry and
I can
angry.
attest
Yep.
to that.
Yeah. But that was extremely relatable of hearing these guys that were writing these songs before I was born. I'm like, how do I relate to that so much? Mm-hmm. But yeah, Minor Threat, the Bad Brains, Pennywise were always inspirations. Also, hometown guys that.
Pennywise with Con 800.
Yep.
Remember Con 800? Hank was he was the best drummer. He fucking would rip. He would play so fast, and he'd reach over, grab a bucket and puke, drink half a pitcher, play the next fucking song.
I'm wondering what you think about my list now. I'm thinking about what I would pick, and I'm not going to try to be like, pretend to be a punk guy, but like definitely growing up near Lake Tahoe, I grew up snowboarding and skateboarding a lot, and we listened to a lot of punk rock as kids. But I would go like NoFX number 1,
I like NoFX.
Pennywise number 2, Lagwagon number 3.
So I call that
the
late
type of
80s.
punk. That was
That was
type
the
of
late
punk that I
80s,
listened
early
to.
90s too.
Yeah, I don't really
And,
know the 80s
and
stuff.
again, the 80s, I think with
The
the
ladies.
internet, it was a little easier for people to come into it at a later time.
Yep.
But I had the luxury of my mom's cassette tapes. Yeah. So there was a time capsule at our TV stereo system.
Yeah.
That was easier for me to find the 80s at the time. But
Yeah, I was a
We
90s
listened to
kid.
lowrider music in my house.
I listen to everything.
Pedro?
Yeah, in Pedro.
TSOL is one of my
It was all
favorites.
about 50s and stuff
Yep,
like that in my
Lowrider
house.
music.
I always
Yeah.
loved TSOL. At the time, it didn't make as much sense to me, but they were a band that constantly rebranded every album.
Yeah.
They started off hardcore, then it got a little gothy, then it got really gothy, and they added pianos in it.
I like the gothy stuff.
And
When
now
I was young, I didn't, but
I like emo music.
yeah, I like the emo.
but
and goth.
that's what makes sense. In the first wave of punk bands, there were no rules.
Yeah.
All the bands sounded different. So you'd look, I mean, I've heard guys tell stories, and if you look, you can see it, but flyers would be like the Go-Go's are playing with the Germs.
Yeah.
Two bands that couldn't sound
Banshees.
any more different. But that was the umbrella of punk. Is it different? Then it's punk.
It was alternative before the label alternative.
Eventually, punk somehow had criteria and a rule set that eventually just starts pigeonholing people. And now, even with my band, if I don't do something that falls in that criteria, we get people like, "That's not punk." I'm like, okay, fine. I don't know.
I feel like this culture around punk music and like this South Bay culture that you're describing from like 80s and 90s is so colorful and great and rich. And I feel like, is it disappearing? I feel like...
Or is it resurging because it disappeared and now it's coming back?
it just would be such a shame. It's like such a cool... I mean, it's like...
Well, this is the thing. Like in this postmodern times that we are, and in the internet era, the age of we're all atomized. I mean, what new sound, new art, new thing have you heard since 1999? There's really isn't. And a lot of like cultural philosophers and historians are marking the post-internet era as an era that really has to retreat to nostalgia for everything, for fashion, for sound, I mean, there aren't iconic cars made anymore, really. They're knockoffs of an earlier look, or knockoffs. I mean, we've improved the technology, the CAD, computer aided drafting, like all these things, but like,
We're in the generation of reboots.
It's a weird
and
era.
AI.
Yeah, all the classic cars. Think of the new the new Bronco. We're redoing the Bronco.
Right.
We're redoing the Mustang. The Charger. The new movies are all reboots of things that aren't even that old. I'm in a punk band in 2024 that is heavily influenced by the 80s of something that came out in the 70s. Not exactly new and innovative. I like to stay fresh with it, but it's been done.
I'm thinking like Cybertruck, and I'm thinking like Ultra.
But even that is modeled after what? Back
to the DeLorean.
That's a DeLorean.
Yeah, it's just
like,
a DeLorean. Come on. It's been around
for
for ages.
The DeLorean truck.
The new thing, and the music, like that, like super, like what was that, Grimes, like her type of music, where it's just this like super futuristic,
Elon's
like
wife?
kind of
But you could,
Elon's
I mean,
lady?
Elon's brief fling.
now, don't get me wrong.
I'd fuck Elon too. Jesus.
I'm
Whoa,
not
don't let
super
him hear that.
knowledgeable.
I'm kidding.
shut up.
Shut up.
Is Grimes not doing stuff that
He said
someone like
Elon
Bjork
Musk.
might have already done? Grimes is just did what like people like Bjork did too, though, right? It's
But Bjork already did that.
Yeah, Bjork did do that.
Like, I don't know if it's because I'm old or because the cultural historians that I read and follow are like all around my age, but like I'm wondering what is
the new thing
out there, new ideas, like whether it's in philosophy, political ideology, whatever, like everything new seems like it's somehow a rehash of something old. Now, some people will say that like the 80s was kind of a rehash of a blend of the 1950s and 60s. And what was underground in the 60s became mainstream in the 70s. What was underground in the 70s went mainstream in the 80s. And what was underground in the 80s went mainstream in the 90s. But then
that's true.
What happened after that?
It's just chaos.
Well, I just feel like it actually kind of freaks me out thinking about this, because now I'm like, what's new is technology. That technology's new, and then the culture's not mattering as much.
Ooh.
And I think
That's
that's
kind of
what
scary.
culture was geographical, and you had things that there was. Let's just keep it in music or art.
Everything's homogenized.
There was the West Coast hip hop. There was West Coast hip hop and East Coast hip hop. Skateboarding
hip-hop.
was very West Coast, East Coast, or NorCal, SoCal.
Yeah.
Everything was geographical. With the internet, I can be an East Coast punk band because
in Wichita, Kansas.
In real time, because I'm seeing exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
So style, like the South Bay punks looked different than the New York punks. Yeah. But now we're all right on the internet, and I can scroll and see that's how you do it in New York in real time. And that's, I think, kids now, there's a generalized age group of style. that's what teenagers look like, and that's what 20s looks
And the
like.
world kind of looks similar. Having traveled around the world,
Yeah.
I can go to another country and feel like I'm at home
Yes.
because of what is it? Corporations?
The mini
or
mall, yeah.
The mini mall, yeah.
I'm
The
opening my
phenomenon.
liquid death.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I remember.
Don't die.
Hit me with one of those. Give me
Do
that
not-
black. Give me the
do
black
not
one.
die.
This one?
He wants
In-
black.
Or no, I'll try this one.
You want gold? Okay.
In 2009, I went to a small town in Texas to instruct. And I saw like the downtown boarded up and abandoned, the big Walmart on the hill. I'm at the like Holiday Inn Express motel, and there's one little strip mall near the Walmart with a corporate franchise of stores. And I remember just like thinking, this is an unsustainable model culturally. It's there's nothing new.
Yeah. That's freaky.
It is freaky.
But one shining light in culture is Slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
Holding it down, keeping it up.
Slaughterhouse.
So how did that come to be? Tell us about Slaughterhouse.
I played in bands forever. I played in I started my first band in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Played in bands through high school, post high school. Stayed in bands. The last band I was in before this one broke up 2015, and it was kind of like, okay, I don't know what to do. And now all my peers are starting to get a little older too, so I'm losing some friends that still want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife's at home playing guitar, and we had a drum set in the garage, and like, let's go jam. So I was playing drums. I can't play drums very well. I tried. My girlfriend at the time couldn't play guitar very well, but we could jam. We were jamming stuff, and I was like, I don't want to play drums anymore. I want to play guitar, but we needed a bass player and couldn't find anyone. My friend came over, played drums. I played bass. Very unintentional. Came up with songs. This should be a band. Found a singer. Wow, we have a band. Let's play a show. We played a show. It was awesome. And immediately we're like, let's do more. And we booked a tour. We went on tour. We recorded an EP. EP was cool. And my friend Fletcher, who plays guitar in Pennywise, heard the EP and said, Eddie, this stuff sounds great. I want to come to the next show. He came to the next show. And the singer we had quit immediately. It was like, so this is all in just a matter of a couple months.
Is it this gal that you're talking about that just quit in the story? Is this the gal that does the museum stuff?
No.
This is
So there's a timeline essentially. The girl who started the band with us, again, couple months, didn't last long. She was great. Just what we were looking to do wasn't what she wanted to do. So we found the gal who eventually went on to museum stuff. She came in finding someone who wants to play in a punk band and do. It's a lot of work.
yeah.
Even just going to band practice and writing songs requires a lot. I mean, how many of your peers, outside of the people you know in jiu-jitsu, if you try to tell them, do you want to go to jiu-jitsu several days a week? And it's not.
That's what I'm saying. It's insane the volume of stuff that you do. Really
It's crazy, but it's not appealing to most people. Like, oh, I got to go. We're gonna pay for a room, and I got to be in there for a couple hours, and I have to learn these parts. And
Yeah.
It's a lot, but we found someone who wanted to do it. She did a great job. She was in the band for over 4 years, but the band started picking up momentum. People are starting to like us a little bit, and we were getting offers to go on tour more. And just because you're getting offers on tour does not mean you're making any money.
You toured with the Bad Religion, right?
We toured with Bad Religion. We went out with the Adolescents and Pennywise.
Yeah.
Did some smaller ones with some friends' bands. But that was not her appeal. Like getting in a van and essentially living in... I mean, we sleep in beds, but you're essentially living in a van for weeks at a time or a month at a time. And that's... I'd do longer, but it's hard to do when you're in a van. So she respectfully bowed out. And we had a friend who came on tour with us on the Bad Religion tour to document. She's a bitchin' photographer, cinematographer, super artistic, and she was dropping hints the whole time too, like, I too want to be in a band.
Is this her? This is the
Yes.
Mariel?
Yes. So on the tour, she's dropping hints, and I'm going, you should be in a band then. I don't know what to say. And she kept on dropping hints, and the second our singer let us know, hey, I'm not going to proceed doing this. And again, it's a lot of work. It ain't for everybody. Marielle hit me up immediately. Was like, I heard you need a singer. I want in. Shit. Okay. And we had some stuff going on. Had to get the timeline set. She came in, blew us away. Like came in and new songs. They were amazing. She's been in the band. Long story short, she's been in the band for almost a year now, and 2023 was extremely slow. We knew we were winding down because our singer was quitting, and
Yeah, I remember you being depressed. It
was
like a
horrible.
year ago. We're eating at Fat Burger, and you were pretty bummed.
oh, it was devastating. Our band was getting steam, and it's not easy
No.
to get steam in this stuff.
No,
And
to break through the noise.
It's, I mean, the idea that anyone likes your band at all is a feat, and then people like your band who are in a position to take you on tour and do stuff. I mean, we turned down a couple things because we didn't have a singer at the moment, and then we weren't ready. Once we got Marielle, we weren't ready to just go. You're expected at a certain caliber now too, and by no means is our band the shit yet, but I'm working at it. And it's a lot of work, but 23 was slow, and so far 2024 very promising. Marielle came in.
COVID was slow too.
Oh yeah, that's
Just fucking threw a wrench.
that's
into
what I'm
everything.
saying
Yeah.
too. We had that depression and it's followed up by another depression.
Life's depressing.
You guys rip though, dude. I gotta say,
It was
like,
an awesome show. Yeah.
Yep.
Really
Yeah,
enjoyed that.
I was watching some of the shows before you that were really good, and I was like poking my head in that room, and I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome.
I like
And then-
that Cholo Punk band that was up there.
Yeah, they were
Oh,
cool.
I should have saw that.
It was
I like
super good.
Joel's.
And then when you guys came on stage, though, it was like, it was such a different, like the whole thing was like, bam. Like it popped so
I
hard.
swear, I thought I would be much more famous by now. So
when you were a little boy and you were aspiring to be on.
yes, I still think like that's
the
coming,
awards
right? Am I
at
16 yet?
I think
yeah.
it is coming, dude.
It
I feel
reminds
like
me of Andy with soccer, with their son. He wants to be a professional soccer player.
that's good.
So sweet.
But it's I don't know. That's my that's where I get to be 16 still. When I'm on stage, it's I love music. I do enjoy writing music. Performing it is much more my thing though.
See, that's
Yeah.
good.
And
yeah.
that might be similar to jiu-jitsu. I think we all like learning jiu-jitsu, right?
but we love
But
rolling.
rolling is fun.
Yeah.
That's the
That's the
Well,
escape.
it's kind of the case too for competition because, like, when you're out there in front of people, that becomes its own addiction. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, if you really get into it,
You got an audience.
You're playing
yeah.
the crowd. You got an audience. It's
Yeah.
the same kind. Like that's
Yeah.
I don't know.
similar to being on stage.
If there's and I've done both. If you're playing to 5 people or 5,000 people, I give as much as I have in me. I make sure either the 5 people or the 5,000 people are getting
They get
every
their
amount
show.
of energy that they paid for a ticket. If it's my responsibility to give it to the 5 or 5,000.
But like
amazing.
like when we're teaching seminars and stuff, it doesn't get in your head at all if there's only 5 people and make it a little bit harder to give your all. That's how I feel like if there's a big crowd,
Yeah.
it pumps
It's
you up.
definitely
Oh,
easier
totally.
when there's
Right?
a crowd. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is much. People, are you nervous to play in front of this crowd? No, it's so much easier.
Excited.
Yeah, it's easier
Yeah.
when
It's
there's
so
more
much
people.
easier.
Excited. Yeah. When there's
Yeah.
a crowd. Yeah.
It's when you're on stage, you go, thank you, Jessica, John, and Anthony for coming, because that's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Where are you guys are going on tour though, right? Pretty soon.
We're doing our first Europe trip.
Yay.
I have never left the country. I've been to Mexico and I've gone over to Hawaii, but as far as leaving
You
America,
got your passport.
I do. I have my passport. I made an attempt to go to Canada once. They did not grant me permission to enter.
You looked at him and like, nah, sorry.
It was pretty much that simple.
But Canada's pretty strict.
But yeah, we're going to Netherlands, Germany, Slovenia, and Belgium.
That's
That's
amazing.
Again,
killer.
it's just like getting in the van here. We're getting in the van there.
It's
It
going to be
doesn't-
awesome. You're going to love it.
I'm
It's
super
going to be
excited
huge.
for you,
It's wild the amount of work that it takes, and we've been emails and scheduling and booking things, and we have to rent a van, we have to rent equipment.
Yeah.
It's
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
We've taken the kids on European tours 3 times for jiu-jitsu.
And all the little extra charges they burn you with all the time.
But it's so awesome.
A little nervous.
You'll
I've
love
never
it.
dealt with a language barrier before. I mean, Mexico, I feel like everyone speaks enough English, or just by living in LA.
Everyone
Europe
speaks
pretty much
English
too,
here,
yeah.
too. If you make jokes, like when I taught in Belgium, they might not always get your jokes, but they'll know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But we're playing 2 shows are with the Descendants. We're playing 2 shows with this band, the Mad Caddies. We're on 2 big festivals over there. We have 1 headline show in Cologne. All places I've never been. I got to
That's
constantly
awesome.
look at the map and find out where we're going, but I'm pretty dang excited.
Where do people find out about Slaughterhouse and about what you got going on if they are listening to this and want to hear the music and learn about the shows and stuff?
We're on all streaming platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, whatever else there is. Our social media is at slaughterhouse.la. At slaughterhouse.la. We're on Bandcamp. We have a YouTube channel that it's either Slaughterhouse 911 or 911 Slaughterhouse. Find that. We got our music videos there.
Where's your tour schedule?
Our tour schedule is on. We have a website. Our website
Yeah,
is.
there you go.
Is Google Slaughterhouse Band. Don't Google Slaughterhouse Band. If you Google Slaughterhouse,
it's the wrong
worst band name choice we could have thought of, to be honest. You Google Slaughterhouse, good luck. Please don't look at the dead animals. I'm vegetarian. I don't know. It's on there. You'll find it on our Instagram. Go to Instagram. Everything's on Instagram
We
now.
can-
I'll
put-
link it
we
in
can
the
link
show
it
notes
in,
too
yeah.
for this episode. I'll link all your stuff up so people can check it out.
Thank you.
Yes. How are we doing on time? I had a question from the internet I wanted to throw in there. Yeah? You guys want to
sure,
hit a cue?
Sure. Hit a cue.
Let's
hit
hit
it
a
up.
cue.
Hit me up
I
with
think
a
this
cue.
is a good cue for this group. So, all right. So we've got a lot of awesome comments on YouTube. But this specific one, it's kind of a vintage cue. So I feel like this is a great group. So at MJP-BI3RE is the username for this person. They said, Mr. Haueter, please tell me if Gracie Jiu Jitsu is all that people claim it is. I watched Ron Van Cleef in UFC 4 lose to Hoyce. Van Cleef had a 10th degree black belt and 40 years experience at the time. And in about 5 seconds, he was on the ground and helpless. Is Gracie Jiu Jitsu that good? I'm looking to get into good self-defense oriented school, and your answer is appreciated.
Well, let's just say, what is Gracie with jiu-jitsu, right? And before we answer that, let's just say, what is jiu-jitsu, right? I always say that, like, there's a debate still. Is it Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or is it Gracie jiu-jitsu, or is it just a jiu-jitsu?
I vote the third option.
So Hickson says, just call it the jiu-jitsu.
I'm with Hickson.
You don't have to put an American, Brazilian, even with Gracie. And that each Gracie has their own expression of it, just like each non-Gracie has their
Brazilian.
own expression. Yeah, and each Brazilian. So in some ways, it's like, do you wear a bandage or do you wear Band-Aid brand Band-Aid? And so is Gracie Jiu-Jitsu all it's cracked up to be? I'm going to say absolutely yes. But I encourage you to explore what Jiu-Jitsu is. And what you'll find is the influence of the Gracie family and their original group of students that blew this whole thing up now that we do as Jiu-Jitsu. So yes, it is the best, and at the same time, it's kind of a nonsense question because it's bigger than just Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Go try jiu-jitsu. Just go try it. This is my number one thing too. Whenever someone says what,
You keep getting more weapons as we go along. First, you start choking the guy.
I had a ninja. I would love that everyone did jiu-jitsu. Obviously, I'm a fan of jiu-jitsu. When someone says to me, I want to try jiu-jitsu, what should I try? I say, first off, this is what I tell everyone. Even if you like the first place you try, go try somewhere else. You might like somewhere
I
else
agree.
better.
Mm-hmm.
You might hate the first place and go, fuck jiu-jitsu. No. just like any burger joint is different, jiu-jitsu places are different.
Yep.
The atmosphere,
Regardless of the name.
you might not like how it looks. It might be something that simple. The little place looks weird.
It might smell weird.
So, and then like if you still don't like jiu-jitsu, just go find something else that's healthy and active. Go box then. If you really want to, I'm a fan of jiu-jitsu. That guy might be a fan of boxing. Go do something.
This guy's looking for specifically self-defense activity that he can do. And so I think it's a semantical issue. Like maybe he doesn't realize that there's like
It is a
something that's
semantical
specifically
issue. Yep.
Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and then there's Jiu-Jitsu.
If you go to a Baja Gracie school, it probably will be more sport oriented than if you go to Fred's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu old school, which might be more self-defense, original Gracie curriculum oriented, original Haleo and Carlos curriculum, right?
Yeah.
How many places did you have to choose from when you got into jiu-jitsu?
Originally one.
There you go.
Horion's Garage.
I had a small handful, and I feel like there's so many at least here. I don't know where this person is, but I like to think even if you're in a small town, you probably got more options. Try everywhere offers a trial. Go try jiu-jitsu.
martial
Yeah, and
arts.
maybe it isn't even specifically jujitsu. Maybe, like you said, it's boxing or Krav Maga or who knows, whatever it is, right? But if you have martial arts gyms in your area, it's worth
Yes.
doing some research before you commit to anything, you know? And even if you commit, you can always change. So,
Yeah, I encourage open-mindedness, skepticism, and enthusiasm. And with those three things, whatever you approach, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I think the answer to the question is yes, that's a great place to start looking, and you're going to start on a martial arts journey, and that's going to be great self-defense for you to start on that journey and get into it, whatever you get into, right? So
And it probably will alter your entire life,
Totally.
mostly for the better.
I'll tell this person he's got to find his answer somewhere in this hour and a half episode.
yeah. Okay, one last thing I wanted to try before we wrap it up. Do you have a story about a fight that you wish you never picked that you can share?
Honestly, any fight I ever picked, if you're picking fights, if there's a fight that I picked, I probably shouldn't have done it. I think luckily the majority of all the encounters that I've been in are quite relatively justified. I was protecting someone who was being bullied, or I didn't back down to a bully who was trying to bully me. I wasn't always perfect, but I guess in that sense, simply, if there was ever a fight I picked, there's no backstory to why I probably shouldn't have picked a fight. So that's the simple
That's a good answer.
simple answer to that.
Kind of put you on the spot, but that's a good answer.
No, it's- I
good
mean,
generic
it's-
answer for a specific question.
I think people say and do not that you should go out and fight people. Fighting is not the only answer. It is an answer that I think people think. I mean, I think the public thinks if you're winning. From what I've seen, if you're winning a fight, the outside sees the winner of the fight as the bad guy. That's just how. If you're going to stop a situation,
A certain crowd does.
if you're going to stop, if you came into a scenario and there's two guys, me and you, are in a fight, whoever's on top winning is generally looked at as the one that they need to stop. You could have been stopping me from an armed robbery, but if you only came into the scenario where there's a guy on top of another guy, no one typically stops to think like he's probably doing that for a very good reason. But I don't know. Fighting, I'm not against fighting. I wish it shouldn't be your first resort. As I'm holding a knife.
Club.
But it's real. I think people walk around on this planet and say and do things because we've become a society that's against physical altercation. But people say and do things under the impression that there's no consequences for their actions or things they do. And again, I'm not saying because someone says something, you should go punch him in the mouth. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I try to say things under the impression that someone might not like what I say and they might want to punch me in the mouth over it.
Yeah.
So kind of,
Yeah.
it's a thing that should help keep you in balance, in my opinion.
Good answer.
Don't bully anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those things, like everything. As a Taoist, it's there's good and bad to knowing violence. And it's you should never think it's all good and never think it's all bad.
I'm thankful now with a skill set. I heard Hedon Gracie say one time, if anyone ever picked a fight with him, it's the luckiest person they will have ever picked a fight with.
Yeah.
I love that I have a skill set and a know-how and a composure through humility that I've learned at jiu-jitsu, where I can trust myself that I'm not going to injure or inflict damage on somebody.
See red.
No, I mean,
Go nuts.
even when we were getting in fights as
berserk.
kids all the time, I loved winning fights. I never wanted to hurt anyone. My intentions were never to. I mean, there was fights that my team would be winning, and I would constantly be like, "That's enough." Like it's
It's like sport unlicensed, but boxing. It was almost like,
I don't know.
I get that.
I don't want anyone's skull crushed. I don't want anyone losing their teeth. I'm not trying to make people bleed. Fights when we were kids were hopefully nothing more than immature behavior that was fueled by adolescence and not knowledge. But beyond that, I think if you fight a jiu-jitsu guy, hopefully that jiu-jitsu guy has also learned humility and can do something to diffuse a situation, even if some sort of physical force was needed. But I don't think jiu-jitsu guys should be going out there and breaking people's arms or punching their face in because they achieved mount. It should hopefully be a show of dominance of like, this does not need to go further.
Control.
Yeah. Hopefully that's all it needs to be if you ever have to use your skill set in a real situation.
Yeah.
But also with the fear that if you've had to do that, hopefully you know the difference of don't let a bad guy up who might come up and grab a weapon and do something. I don't know. That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well,
Don't get in fights, man. Be cool.
yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Eddie.
And we'll probably be wrapping this episode up with a Slaughterhouse song.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Pound the like button and